Hello, this is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative take about the world around me. So feedback is greatly important. Feel free to reach out to me, and those means will be provided for you in this episode. Alright, so some of the audio platforms that I'm on Spreaker. And mentioning Spreaker, if you can kindly, the Spreaker is a great platform. And boost up the ratings. It would be greatly appreciated if you download my content on Spreaker as well as all the other audio platforms. It would be greatly appreciated. Alright, and some of the other platforms that I'm on iHeartRadio. And these are, and mostly everything except for the Apple podcast, but it's quite interesting. I have to check into that. I have some listeners that do, use Apple products or so forth to listen to me, and that's quite interesting, those features. But anyhow, I greatly appreciate all of you, however you listen to me. Thank you so much. Alright, so it's Friday, so this episode is all about giving back to the listeners out there. And so I'm still focusing in on fashion. And this week, the country I'm focusing in on is Vietnam. Here we go. Alright, so my thoughts about everything before I start getting into the content. The facts, that is. So, again, I can't stress this enough, It's truly remarkable how that saying goes from Mark Twain. Travel, and of course I'm paraphrasing here. In a nutshell, when you travel, you understand, you get in the midst and immerse yourself in different cultures. It erases narrow-mindedness and bigotry. And so what does all that mean? That means that, again, when you start to dig deep and learn and understand other people's points of views, what that might be and how they may see things, you start to get out of your head and get outside of yourself and see things for what they are, if you want to. And then when that traveling, and I'm glad I'm starting to get the opportunity to do so this summer, and and then continue that out throughout my lifetime here. And you start to see things for a greater difference here. And it's really something to take in the aspects of how that relates to other cultures. And I can't stress this enough with the aspects of how, again, that saying that says you are what you eat, you are what you wear and how you present yourself. And so all these things take into account in the aspects of what is valuable and what is not valuable, and how people look and wear and think and feel about the aspects of clothes in their culture. Specifically when we're transitioning to the aspects of old versus new world and how that succinks itself with the aspects of going on to other generations and going on to, a modern aspects of living. And it's quite unique, and it's interesting when there's so many examples of that, different cultures of that. But to highlight cultures that do this quite well, and they try to keep up, with the aspects of traditions, with the aspects of modernity, is quite interesting, because again, it gives, to me, it is a example of the benefits of understanding and really being truly taking the terms of what it means to be progressive in your thoughts instead of repressive in your thoughts, instead of being, just the opposite of what growth and everything is when you're trying to have your society thrive in an ever-changing world. All right, with all of this said, I'm going to get into the facts about fashion of Vietnam. Here we go. Okay, so here is a brief overview. All right, let me pull it up for you. It says Vietnam fashion history. So Vietnamese fashion history spans over a millennium. So it reflects the diverse culture and exchange that have shaped the country's style. The traditional Vietnam clothing, known as Vietnam or the aspects of the indigenous and foreign elements due to the influence of various dynasties and cultural exchanges. And then, also getting back to the aspects of dynasties, they in itself shine a lot of insight about the aspects of hierarchy and how that when there are countries that have that sort of system, that's how that interchanges the relationship between the people, the citizens, and the monarchy. It's quite interesting. All right, so during the Lea dynasty, which was from 1009 to 1225, the clothing system was established with policies to distinguish social ranks. So this meant the use of local fabrics was promoted over imported ones. So the ao dai, a long gown with the side slits, became a symbol of Vietnamese fashion, and its designs have evolved over time to fit the body more closely and expose a pair of white silk trousers. So by the time the 20s came about, the influence of Western fashion began to permeate Vietnamese society. So this led to a blend of traditional and modern styles. So today, everyday clothing in Vietnam is often referred to as Western clothing. But traditional attire like the ao dai remains popular for special occasions and is considered the unofficial national dress. In recent years, there has been a resurgence of interest in ancient Vietnamese costumes, with groups like the Great Vietnamese focusing in on researching and reproducing clothing from hundreds of years ago. These efforts have made traditional costumes more visible among young locals and have been featured in various exhibitions and projects such as Really, which is 1,000 Years of Vietnamese Fashion, and this is a video that was produced by the Vietnamese Center. So the ao dai, which has been a significant part of the Vietnamese fashion history, continues to evolve while maintaining its traditional roots. Modern designers incorporate contemporary elements and vibrant colors into their designs, reflecting the changing tastes and preferences of Vietnamese people. So again, this is a good reflection of looking outward, inward. What is, the overall encompassing aspects of what is thought about Vietnamese culture, but digging deeper into the elements of what is actually what is actually presented, thought about, seen, and reflected in the culture. It's good to get insight about that because, again, it starts to merge together the aspects of deeper understanding of other cultures and how they move and think and why things happen the way they do in their society. So, ancient decorative patterns and traditional clothing systems from various dynasties, such as the Li and the Nguyen, are also being digitized and applied to modern products, promoting the preservation and appreciation of Vietnamese culture and heritage. Overall, Vietnamese fashion history showcases a blend of traditional and modern influences, with a growing interest in reviving and celebrating ancient styles. Alright, so I am going to wrap up and dig even deeper about more elements that gives more insight in the aspects of clothes and fashion in Vietnam. Here we go. Here we are. Alright, so clothes and clothing customs in Vietnam. So, the traditional attire of the Khmer Vietnamese, or the Vietnamese in the north, is a brown pajama set for men. So, a 4-panel robe and the trousers for women, or bra for women, are also brown too. And they are usually worn. So, the southern Delta Plains, both men and women wear black pajamas. So, at present, the Khmer's costume resemble Western clothing. Traditional costumes of Vietnamese people tend to be very simple and modest. In feudal times, there were strict dress codes. Ordinary people were not allowed to wear clothes with dyes other than black, brown, or white. Costumes in yellow were reserved for the king. Those in purple and red were reserved for high-ranked court officials, while dresses in blue were exclusively worn by petty court officials. Men's dress has gradually changed along with social development. The traditional set of a long gown and turban gave way to modern-looking suits, while business shirts and trousers have replaced traditional long-sleeve shirts and wide trousers. Traditional costumes still exist, and efforts are increasing to be made to restore the traditional look and in the aspects of festivals and entertainment, which incorporate these traditional attires. So, in general, Vietnamese clothing style is very diverse. Every ethnic group in Vietnam has its own style of clothing. Yeah, and that in itself builds up the culture. So, for instance, in America, America is at large very diverse because there's so many different cultures within everything that's here in the U.S. And that's greatly due to the aspects of how in the beginning of Ellis Island, people coming and looking and seeking opportunity and the aspects of that. And then, with all of this, how that influences the aspects of different old world and new world trends that began to blend itself in America. When we get in the aspects, for instance, New York and Chicago are really good examples of this. So, in the establishment, I know, when we get into the aspects of New York and Chicago, specifically when we get into the Gilded Age and we get in the aspects of the influx of different immigrants coming into America in search of a better opportunity. We have so many different where it goes with food, clothing. When we get in the aspects of Dutch, German, we get in the aspects of Chinese, we get in the aspects of so many things. It's really prevalent in the way all those traditions influence how the American culture is developed throughout different generations. And then when we get into Chicago, we get the aspects of, Polish. We get in the aspects of, Czechoslovakia and, those different regions coming into the Midwest and greatly contributing a lot of their cultural traditions with them and how that relates to living in America. That's very prevalent, and the best examples of both of this is food and fashion, and how everything is embedded into, there's unique styles within New York and Chicago, and how people think about the culinary aspects of stuff that comes from these two cities. And then, the fashion aspects too. Alright, so going back. In general, Vietnamese clothing is very diverse for every ethnic group, and Vietnam has its own styles. So festivals are the occasion for all to wear their favorite clothes. Over thousands of years, the traditional clothing of all ethnic groups in Vietnam have changed, but the ethnic group has separately maintained their own characteristics. And the mountain areas, people live in houses built on stilts, where trousers or skirts and indigo vests with design motifs. They imitate the wildflowers and the beast. In the northern uplands and the central highlands, the young women have made skirts and vests with beautiful and colorful decorations in a style convenient for farm work and the work in the fields, and to travel on the hilly slopes and mountain gorges. So Vietnam considered clean, well-preserved clothing to be important. Women usually don't wear skirts above their knees, and men don't wear shorts. It's not unusual to see men wearing their pajamas on the streets. It is acceptable for older men to wear their pajamas and sandals as their regular day-to-day wear. So Vietnamese embroidery and jewelry. Let me go with the aspects of this. So as soon as the 2nd century, the Vietnamese were using gold and silver to create jewelry. There are 3 different techniques used to make gold and silver jewelry, including carving, casting, and so forth. So because of the flexibility of raw materials, the color of gold and brightness of silver creates beautiful necklaces and earrings and rings and trays and cups that were created out of this. So, men and women's clothing in Vietnam. So, why was I talking about jewelry? So, jewelry in itself is an accent piece, but it also is embedding about the aspects of, the symbol of different values and culture, and what those jewels mean, or what those accents means on the people who wear them. Alright, so men and women's clothing in Vietnam. Men wear brown shirts and white trousers, so their headgear is simply a piece of cloth wrapped around the head, and their footwear consists of a pair of plain sandals. For formal ceremonies, men would have 2 additional items, a long gown and stilts on either side, and a turban, usually a black or brown, made of cotton and silk. Young women wear light brown colored short short skirts and long black skirts. The outer garment is a special silk gown called the, forgive me for the pronunciation, but I'll try this, aututan, which is brown or light brown in color. And they are divided equally on the lower section with the 4 slits. Alright, so fashion industry in Vietnam, how it's growing in the mid 2000s and so forth. So Ho Chi Minh City, okay, where we get in the aspects of, we get, let me go back to that. There's a style in the collection here and it's suited by Vietnamese taste. So fashion scenes may stand out in the traditionally stand communist country, but it is light with the way ahead of Vietnamese flooding the fashion industry, both domestically and if it is to attempt to make its mark in global markets for haute couture. That's quite interesting. So, fashion among Vietnamese youth. So in Vietnam, as the rest of the world, men are generally less fashion focused than women, but even some men are beginning to pay more attention to what they wear. So some are adopting a sort of American skateboarder look, and some, like their female counterparts, are dyeing their hair red. One young man who lives across the street from this writer says, they live across the street from one another. They wears jeans that has the international torn and fray look, which is quite interesting with the aspects of how that went about when beat up, ripped, torn material. That says a lot about the aspects of getting back to when that was really, really prevalent. When we get into what it reminds me of, and this is what I'm reflecting to. When it was made more mainstream and high fashionable and trendy to do, and it's one of those things is a symbol of a era, is the grunge look. And so, most of the bands or artists who were in the label with the grunge look, hey, they were actually struggling, and they were just, embodying the aspects of embracing their circumstances, and it just, the sort of music that came out of the, quote unquote grunge era, or, grunge genre, really produced a lot of authenticity with the aspects of the day-to-day life of making social commentary about the social classes and everything that is in modern society. It's quite interesting. So, there are no laws on the books regulating what women and men can wear, but it's saying that there are traditional Vietnamese clothes that are not as revealing. And so, yeah, that's quite interesting with the aspects of modesty and how, that merges itself with the aspects of youth culture wanting to follow trends and blending the modesty together with modern fashion. So, let's see, go on to, and I'm going to end on this with the aspects of everything else. So again, too, this also gives an insight with the aspects of how, as it was mentioned about, the aspects of communist rule and the aspects of how that interlaces itself with, governmental rule and a society. That speaks of volumes too, with the lots of aspects of how things progress in different cultures, certain societies. And so again, that's something to really consider with the aspects of everything. And how, again, with the aspects going back to freedom and circumstance of that, is how the progression of a country flourishes with the aspects of that too. Even though there are, aspects of communist rule and everything else that are, relevant, still remain, and the aspects of Vietnamese culture, still the aspects of progression and the aspects of giving that purpose of letting people flourish is, again, finding and figuring out that balance is what makes countries really develop and change for the greater good too. So I'd like to know what you all think. Feel free to reach out to me, and I'll have, again, those links provided for you. So this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. Tune in, turn up, and absolutely take care. Bye-bye.